Hey all, how are you? Welcome to the podcast. This is Recording Drums with me, Blair Sinta. Today we have Brody Simpson from all the way down in Perth, Australia, the far west side of Australia. I've been there once. Pretty cool place. And if you follow drummers on Instagram, you may know Brody. I think he really stands out for his sonics that he's getting and his playing. Really amazing time feel, really awesome creativity sonically. Beautiful feel, beautiful hands, and super cool guy. And one thing I loved about this interview is that, there's an Instagram persona that, is often prevalent with, it doesn't matter what you're in, whether it's drumming or, whatever your profession is. And, Brody's is, this kind of like, really tight beats, metric modulations, sound things. But it turns out he actually is playing a lot of music with people, with bands, recording vocalists, recording bass players, and we get into all this stuff. So, the Instagram thing can be super one-dimensional, which I think a lot of us should remember that, you're only seeing like one minute fraction of people and maybe what they do. All right, so we're going to talk a lot about that. This one's a little longer. I was really curious to meet Brody. We'd exchanged a handful of messages before, but I was really curious to get to know him a little bit. So this one goes a little bit long. Pretty fun. All right, my course is Introduction to Recording. If you are new to recording drums, you want to learn some basics, minimal miking, this will give you an excellent foundation. Phase, 1 mics, 2 mics, 3 mics, 4 mics, 3 mics, 6 mics. I think it's a really great course just to get a handle on recording, no matter your room size, just to understand what you need to do to get going. Also, improve your groove if you're into playing grooves. Studio drumming, just having a great pocket, great feel. These are a lot of my methods, things I've worked on over the years, things that I have found that have worked for me to get to my point in my career, and they're there for you. Also, for free, I have a PDF online. You can get it just on the front page of my website. My free go-to recording gear PDF. It's right there. Check it out. www.blairsinta.com. Without further ado, let's go to Western Australia. Brody Simpson. So you're obviously from there, yeah?
Yeah. Not from Perth originally. I grew up in the country. I was my parents were farmers.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah. But I've lived in Perth since I was 15, 16, like 20 years now. God, 20 years. God damn, I'm fucking old.
I know.
My God.
I know. I got 10 years on you, dude. So,
well, you look real good, so
thanks,
don't worry about
Thank
that.
You. Right on. That's crazy, though. Your parents are farmers and you became a drummer? That's insane.
My dad played drums way back in the day, so I had a kit set up. Okay. So I had the actual ideal scenario of like having a kit set up on 10,500 acres of land where I could play it whenever I wanted, and then just didn't. So
right, of course. Yeah.
Waited till I got to the city where it was much more inconvenient to practice drums. I guess that's why I never really practiced drums. One of those.
Because you were
things.
out there, you mean?
I mean, even now that I'm in the city, I'm like, and I have a studio that I can play drums in whenever I want. I'm like, I still don't practice drums. I didn't build those habits when I was a kid, obviously.
Somehow I don't believe that, dude. Come on.
Man, if you see me put a video up,
yeah,
that's when I've practiced drums. That's me practicing drums, and that's about it.
Right.
Yeah, it's rare that I play outside of that in sessions. So, yeah.
Right. But your fucking time feeling, like your hands are fucking insane for somebody who doesn't practice.
Well, thank you. My hands have been more insane. They're not great these days. Pretty much everything I do now, like, I think I've found that little niche where my facility is cool for that.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I'm probably going to have to put some work in. Like the last time I sat down on the practice pad, I was just like, oh shit, I need to do this way more often.
Right. But you're getting out what you want to get out. So.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Like it's like if I was to go and practice a whole bunch of like crazy hand and facility stuff, like I just can't imagine myself ever using it. I'd rather spend time watching tutorials on, like I just was watching Andrew Sheps talk about parallel processing vocals. Like that right. Means a whole lot more to me than how fast my paradiddle diddles are.
Yes. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's the thing, man. You get into the recording thing and you're like, a whole nother skill set that I've got to spend like the whole rest of my life getting even remotely good at.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you fall in love with that like a long time ago, the recording part of it?
I kind of fell into it a little bit. So like I always enjoyed, if I came in, like I grew up doing the original band thing. Never, like I've played like a handful of cover gigs in my life, a couple of weddings, right. Like that sort of stuff. Everything I did up until my late 20s was just in the one or two bands that I happened to be in that were, my bands. Okay. So I didn't get to record a hell of a lot because, you don't record that often with the one band. But every time I did it, I'm like, I like this way better than all the other aspects of being in a band. And then the opportunity kind of came up to, it didn't really come up. I sort of pushed towards that opportunity, but my business partner had the opportunity to run a studio for another guy who had taken over a different space and was kind of moving out of this, but wanted someone to run it. And I just quit. I'd been working in a music store and I hated retail. So I had just quit that not long before. So I just sort of said to my business partner, who is in one of the bands that I play in, okay, if he wants you to run it and turn over all this money, why don't we just actually take over the studio together and figure it out from there? And wow. 10 years later, still very much figuring it out.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of fell ass backwards into it, man. Like I had no idea what I was doing. My idea was like, I'll learn a bit of the recording stuff. I'll kind of help run the place. I'll play on stuff. And now when I think about that, like me thinking I could be a session drummer back then, knowing as little as I knew, was just uncharacteristically like absolutely so arrogant. My default state these days is, there's absolutely no fucking way I could do that. But yeah, back then I was like, oh wow, I can't believe I thought that that's what I could do at the time.
I think that's what's happening. What's happened to all of us though that are doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, for me, I felt like a total imposter for like a long time. I was like, I'm not in a real studio. And then at some point, like just a couple of years ago, I was like, wait a minute, this is how everybody does it now. You know what I mean? Like I was like,
man,
but my career is kind of bullshit sitting in my own studio, but you know what I mean?
That's the thing, man. If someone said to me, can you come and run a session at somebody else's studio, like engineer it, I would have absolutely no fucking idea what to do. I'm sure, some of the principles would kick in.
I don't believe that at all, but I know what you mean.
It's the logistical stuff. It's the like signal flow and patching and like, how does the audio get from that room to this room? It's that sort of shit that I'm terrible at. Whereas like in my studio, I know exactly how it works. Right. And I'm totally cool to stick with that. Right. Also, man, the whole thing of like doing your own drums at your own studio, I've heard a lot of shit drum sounds come out of great studios. You know what I mean? Well, that happens a lot.
But who's fault is that, right?
Well, who knows where the fault, where the blame lies there. But, if you're in control of every aspect of it yourself, then you know where the blame lies. So.
Right. Okay, so what I'm looking at right now, this is not where you do an Instagram video. It's a different room?
No, it is. It's just it's a slightly different angle. I've started doing from this angle, but it looks vastly different with a terrible laptop camera.
Okay. Because it looks smaller from like a video, like right here. Is that just because we're closer?
It's just the bad laptop camera. I mean, it's not a massive live room, but it's a terrible angle to try and film things from. But this is kind of the easiest place to set things up when I'm actually doing remote sessions. So
right.
Yeah.
And are you like? I'm not going to jump ahead to there. Like, wait, I got like 1,000 questions for you because I'm part of me is like it's amazing that maybe I sound like an asshole, but for me living in Los Angeles and thinking like, wow, you live in Perth, that's amazing, you're doing what you're doing, but maybe I'm just being ignorant. Like
no, I think that's 100% justified because on like especially if you're talking session playing, if you think about the locations for session work in the world, there's a handful of them, and Perth doesn't really rank in the top few percentile of those handful of places,
Right.
But that was kind of the intention behind the whole Instagram thing, was that I don't want to leave Perth. Like, I have no interest in living elsewhere. I'm very happy here.
Right. Cool.
So, and also, like, I guess if I went to Nashville or LA or somewhere, there would be more opportunities in person. I'd meet more people, but I like where I am. I've been to the States a few times, and as much as I love so many people there, and I loved most of the places I went to, I don't want to live there.
Right.
So, like, the Instagram thing was about getting my name out there and forgetting the idea of being a local drummer, because I don't really care about that. I'm not really massively part of the local music scene here or anything like that. Right. That kind of stuff doesn't really interest me.
Sure. Cool.
So yeah, that's the idea behind this. And the Instagram thing was what made me figure out that, oh shit, I could actually do work for people remotely, because people started asking me about doing that for them. So
right. Yeah. So it really, that's the thing that kind of like solidified a lot of your work these days.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, though, it actually got me more work from local people, because I hadn't been the guy that was out playing heaps of gigs in different genres and doing that sort of stuff. Right. People had only ever seen me in the couple of bands that I'd played in. Right. So they had no idea what I actually played drums like, apart from those scenarios. Sure. So it's actually crazy the amount of like work I've gotten from local clients through doing something that was intended for getting work not locally, So, that's a great byproduct of the whole thing as well.
Work is work.
Exactly, man. I don't really care where it comes from, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. And then, so do you have people come by then locally to the studio, or are you always like, I'm doing it on my own? Like,
no, most of the work I do is still actual recording work with bands and artists and whatnot, like recording full songs and whatever, all instrumentation, because it is a fully functioning commercial studio.
Okay, so you'll have a band come in and you'll do like a full record date or a song or two with them.
Yeah, we tend to do batches of like 2 or 3 songs, sometimes EPs, and very rarely albums.
Okay.
I like doing albums, but I also prefer to have sort of quicker turnover with jobs. Like,
sure.
Certain, if you get invested in an album, it's the sort of thing that you're going to be working on for months. And I just would prefer to work on multiple projects that last for a handful of days here and there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny because the way Instagram projects you or me, whatever, is like, oh, here's a cool drum sound I made, blah, blah, blah. And like,
yeah,
my perception of maybe what you would be doing would be a lot of like, oh, a dude in Japan sends you a track, a guy in, Britain sends you a track,
Yeah.
And it's very stylistic to what you're doing on Instagram, but it sounds like maybe that's totally off base.
Well, that wouldn't be your fault that was off base, because I'm terrible at actually telling people what I do. Like, I do my Instagram things, my little Instagram videos. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, cool. And, if people think that's what I do, then that's what I think I do. I'm bad at communicating otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I hope that doesn't come off the wrong way.
No, not at all. No.
I think actually, for me to hear that, like, you do a lot of band projects, that is like, that's kind of awesome. It's like, okay, yes, you are great at doing what you're doing that like a lot of the world sees, but you're actually making like real music in the room with people, like banded music. Like,
there's a lot more engineering and production work than actual session work. I'm trying to get more session work, but I'm also kind of bad at finding it and dealing with it. Like, I'm the band thing sort of, the studio just kind of naturally acquires those clients, whereas with the session work, I do kind of naturally acquire them now because of the Instagram thing and because I've worked with producers and they'll tell mates and whatnot. But the band thing is that just comes to the studio. We don't really go looking for it, so that tends to be the work I tend to do. But I have tried to step up the remote session thing lately. I just really enjoy it, man. Like,
yeah,
and it's actually easier as well, like the idea that you can just, close a laptop when you feel like you're done with the session sort of thing.
Right.
So I do all my remote sessions in real time. On Zoom calls and via audio movers. So Zoom for video and audio movers for audio. I used to do the whole people will send me tracks and I'll put down, give them a couple of takes. Really, it was a couple of hours of me trying stuff out and then comping it and putting it together and editing and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And let them choose from that. But I just got sick of like guessing at what people wanted.
Yeah.
So I just started doing everything in real time. And it's crazy how much more of a producer role you end up taking from the drum set when you're doing that. The session I did yesterday, both songs, it was for a dude in Sydney. Mm-hmm. Both songs ended up changing like quite drastically in certain sections because it was sort of fairly ambiguous as to what they could be. Mm-hmm. And then doing it in real time and like workshopping stuff on the spot, man. That the first time I did that, I'd sent a session to a mate of mine who's a great songwriter, great producer, a guy called Howski. He's based in Sydney. And he's like, oh man, I really like, it's definitely the right vibe. He's like, but this part and this part and this part. And I'm like, and you could sort of tell that he was like, didn't want it to be an imposition for me to do it again, and also wasn't totally happy with it because we neither of us really knew what was going on with the tune to a high enough degree. And I just sort of said to him, like, well, just jump on Zoom and let's just do it in real time. And half an hour later, we were both just like, why are we not working like this on everything,
Right. Right.
Yeah, so much better. So yeah, everything I do is that way now.
Okay, so you almost require it. Like, hey, if you send me a track, this is how we're going to set up a time and this is what we're going to do.
I've never actually specifically said to someone, this is how I must do my sessions, but I just send them an email with, a copy and pasted spiel just saying, this is how I usually run my sessions. Right. And no one's ever said, I don't want to do it that way. Okay, so I just do it that way. Right. And if someone said to me, oh, I don't want to do it that way, I would probably say, that's fine. I definitely prefer to do it that way. And here's the reasons why. But they wanted me to just send them some shit. Right. I'd be happy to. I just don't like doing recalls. So
yeah,
I don't want to do recalls.
It gets very sticky sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you think you've done something like really great. You're like, this is awesome. I played the shit out of this. The sounds are great. And you send it to them and they go, yeah, cool. You're like, no, I should have stopped a half an hour in and made sure they dug it, but you go down the rabbit hole. Yeah, like, this is dope, but you're really in your own head, right? Like,
I had that happen a couple of times, and I just thought, I don't want to, And man, I guess if someone desperately doesn't want to do it that way, I don't think I would need to know the reason why, but I would be curious as to the reason why, because I do feel like every time I've done it, in real time, the results have been better and the clients have been happier. And, by the time I sort of close the laptop and say, I'll go away and put these together and just finesse the sounds a bit more and send you some stems, right, they're sort of really eagerly waiting for them. They're really excited about the process. Whereas the other way around, you kind of do that thing where you send files and then if you haven't heard back from it in a couple of days, you're like, well, I've changed my whole setup now. I can't really do recalls anymore. Yeah. I've moved on to something else, or I've completely gotten rid of the kit out of the live room because I've had another client come in to track whatever they're tracking.
Right.
It's logistically actually too difficult for me to do it that way these days.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that because I feel like I talked about that a lot on here. It's like, even though I do it like, at least 50% of the time, if not more, tracking by yourself is kind of dumb because music should be community. Making music should be communal.
Yep.
Whether it's 2 people or 8 people or 9 people, whatever.
Yeah.
And things are always better when there are mistakes, and those mistakes turn into part of the tune or like a good idea.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing as well. It's like, so many of the things you're going to get sent have been made entirely in isolation by the artist that's making them. Right. So if I then go and record drums entirely in isolation,
right,
it's one more lost opportunity to improve the song through communicating with, other musicians.
Right.
Right. And I'll find things. There was actually not the 2 tunes I did yesterday, the 2 tunes I did a week ago for the same client though. After I started tracking something, I said, how do you feel about this kind of idea for this section? He was like 100% on board immediately to go back and change all his parts for that section, because he just saw straight away that he's like, oh, okay, that's actually going to move the song in the right direction. Whereas if we hadn't been in that real-time scenario, I would have just played something that fit the demo tracks.
Right.
And that would have never happened. The song would have stayed in that form, which is, objectively, subjectively, one of the two. Less good or differently bad, differently good,
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I really prefer it now. And I haven't done a ton of live sessions, but all the live sessions I've done, I've always walked away from them going, when actually tracking full live band at the same time with me playing, I've always walked away from them going, that just felt easier because everyone could communicate in the room. There wasn't a guessing game going on. And easier translates to more enjoyable, and hopefully translates to repeat customer.
And, yeah, and there's an exhilaration when you leave at the end of the day, like you've created with people.
Yeah, for sure.
And that cannot be replaced by, when you finish at the end of the day and you get the text back like, great, I love it, send over the files. Like, that's not the same feeling as like, yeah, we just like played the shit out of a take or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a live remote thing for a Canadian artist called Bahamas. He was doing sort of getting rhythm sections from around the world to do like a live stream thing with him.
Cool.
And his management hit me up, and they're like, yeah, we've got Nashville, we've got New York, we've got LA, and we kind of want Perth. And I'm like, all right, well, that's ridiculous, but sure, I'm not going to say no. And we did that, and we did like 6 or 7 tunes live in, I think if you took out breaks, and because it was filmed from multiple angles, camera setup, lighting setup, and all that sort of stuff, we did 6 or 7 tunes in like, I think about 2 hours, and they came out great.
Whoa. And
I just went, that's just so much better than guessing at shit on your own in a room.
Yeah.
Because, man, I could never be so foolhardy and arrogant to think that my ideas are good all the time, because they certainly are not.
And so we're talking sonics too, I would assume.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'll set up for the remote sessions, I'll set up what I think is appropriate.
Yeah.
But I'll always have another snare or two sort of sitting close by. I have a guitar stand full of cymbals right next to me. And just sort of do things that way, and be like, I feel like this is the vibe for the snare, and they'll be like, could it maybe be, a bit lower, a bit higher, whatever it might be. And it's never more than a 5-minute tweak.
Sure.
To get it towards the place that it's sort of meant to be.
Yep.
And that's just the beauty of doing it in real time, is that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah,
and obviously, if I change the sonics of the kit just that little bit, it changes my playing entirely.
Yeah. So what do? You kind of set the laptop up across the room. You have audio movers going. You have your basic setup, and then obviously changing snares is easy. But do you ever change kicks or whatever, or manipulate?
So if I'm doing, I'll rarely actually swap out a kick drum or anything like that. That it's normally close enough. I can sort of adjust the muffling or the tuning or a little,
Right.
And I'll also explain to them when I first sort of run a bit of audio to test everyone's levels of cool and whatnot. I'll also explain, like, this is the reason why I've chosen this sound. And here's the reference that I had in mind for that tone. And people are normally, I don't know, it's not like I'm selling it to them, but, if you give them a reason why you've chosen a specific thing, it gives it more value than just saying, here's the tones, fucking suck it up.
You're the expert, so they're coming to you for a reason, right?
Hopefully so.
Well, I mean, I think that probably translates. Like, drum tones pretty well, as far as I can tell.
Well, I mean, it's basically all I think about, so I'd hope some of it stayed.
I couldn't tell.
It's kind of what I do now. So yeah, people are pretty willing to go with it if you can give them the reason why you've chosen that sound.
Yeah.
But yeah, tuning and muffling and stuff, super easy to adjust. Cymbals are super easy to adjust. I'm rarely going to adjust my mic setup. I keep a fairly standard mic setup with just enough channels to cover whatever basses they may need, pretty much.
So you had to move that SM7 off the ride cymbal.
I did, which I had on there yesterday, and I pulled up the channel when I was putting it together to send it to him. I'm like, it does not work for this song. You just don't even need a ride mic.
Right.
So I may not even send him that channel. Actually, we'll see.
Yeah.
I've got these. You can't really see them in the shot. Bees Knees Lulu small diaphragm condensers. They're an Australian company.
Oh, cool.
And just stick definition in them is off the charts. They're a pinch bright for my liking, but I just can't get past how good the stick is in them. So I've been using them a lot lately. Yeah, I do like them a lot. They sound good on everything as well. They sound ridiculous on an acoustic guitar.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm happy with those ones. And they're cheap too, like $1,300, and they've had this ongoing deal forever where if you buy one, you basically get the second one for free.
Oh.
It's killer. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. I've turned a few US mates onto them actually, and they've ended up buying them. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I just put two and two together that I don't know how you say it correctly. Dr. Dralian.
Yeah. Dr.
He's down in
Alien
Australia.
Smith. Yeah. Al. He's in Perth. Yeah.
Oh, he's in Perth.
So the demo for that new Alien 8 kick mic, that was me sitting right here on these drums.
Okay, because I was literally looking at it the other day. The Reverb store is from Australia, and I'm like, really? Come on! I
have that mic in my kick drum right now.
Okay.
And I've also got one of his other things, a dirt box, which is like an inline distortion box.
That's what I was looking at. I thought maybe that would probably be the thing because you can just put it anywhere.
They're fun. They're gnarly. On a drum set, it's it goes from fucked up to extra super fucked up. There's not really a subtlety knob on them.
Right.
You know what we used it on? So we did a record a while ago, which I played on, and we also produced and engineered the whole thing, and my business partner mixed it. And it's me on drums, and then everything else is done by the one guy on all the different variations of saxophone and flute and clarinet.
Oh, wow.
But
Who's
did. He's going by Huey Brazidick.
Okay.
He's only released a few of the... Actually, I think he put out a tune yesterday.
Okay.
But it's super... And it's very hard to explain. I got to do all sorts of stupid wonky shit and just, dumb sounds, which was fun. But that dirt box we used on an SM7, 2 foot away from whatever instrument he was playing, just dimed, and it basically turns everything into a synth of some sort. So all the bass sounds on the record are baritone sax pitched down an octave and distorted to balls.
Right. Okay.
All the guitar sounds are just layers of alto sax, which we put through auto wahs, and I'll send you a link. It's pretty gnarly stuff. It's fun, but yeah, that dirt box paid dividends on that record. It was killer.
Okay. It sounds. You ever heard of this guy, Colin Stetson?
No.
He does a crazy... It's funny, I went to high school with him, but I'm not in touch with him at all. But he does a crazy thing where he circular breeze and he plays... I think it's bass saxophone, if I'm not mistaken, lower than Barry. And he circular breeze, and he puts microphones on his neck.
Wow.
And he circular breeze and it gets a tone, but then he also uses the keys somehow for rhythmic things. It's really bonkers, but
yeah, cool.
It might be similar to that, Yeah.
Well, send me a link to that, and I'll pass it on to this guy. I'm sure he's already across it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Man, watching him struggle through Barry sax parts, I did not envy him whatsoever. That's a difficult instrument to make sound good, man.
That is a lot of wind coming out of there, right?
Yeah, it's nuts. And some of the runs were kind of synth bass runs, but on a Barry sax, so real difficult. Yeah. Okay. Sounds killer in the end, though.
Okay, wow. So tell me about your engineering. You're doing all the engineering?
A lot of it. Normally, most projects my business partner and I actually work on together.
Okay. So you kind of trade duties. You kind of
we kind of tag team
spitball.
the different
cool.
instruments.
Uh-huh.
I'll always run the drum side of the session.
Mm-hmm.
I quite often do the vocals these days as well.
Okay.
I've developed a bit of a knack for sort of working with vocalists. It's probably the part of the process I enjoy the most.
That's great. That's a difficult skill.
Man, it's just, I mean, that's the main thing I care about in music. The drums mean very little to me compared to the vocals.
Mm-hmm. What are you talking about, man?
I know, right? Front and center, man. What the fuck aren't singers standing on a riser at the back of stage?
The interview's over, man. You just ruined the whole
thing. Man, my favorite record of like the last 6-12 months is a Swedish artist called Lonely Deer. And the whole record, oh man, it's so good. It's good. The album's called A Lantern and a Bell. He's on Peter Gabriel's label on Real World Records.
Okay.
And that whole record is one song has a kick and snare for like the outro section, and the whole rest of the record is just pianos, little sort of synths and sub basses and stuff and vocal. Yeah. And the song's a killer. He's a ridiculously good singer. Lyrically, it's amazing. But I think one of the main things that draws me to it is I'm not listening to the drums. It just, it means I just get to appreciate the songs more and not start analyzing what some other drummer's done and sitting there going, yeah, I might have done that differently, or I would have never have thought to done that. This guy's way cooler than me, like it's just that typical nonsense,
Yeah. I mean, it's great. It's like a whole ball of wax to open up, which is great. It's just listening to things, all the things you just said, not overanalyzing. Oh, what's that ride cymbal? Oh, that's a pretty bright ride cymbal, or like the feel or the parts or whatever. Just listening to music for music's sake and not getting stuck in your head because there are drums there to analyze.
Well, and I mean, it really is our job to overanalyze drums. Like that's how we've developed the skill sets that we have now, is because we've spent more time thinking about what that particular engineer or producer or drummer had done than just enjoying what they did. Mm-hmm. Maybe not more time. I definitely spend more time thinking about it than enjoying it. I'm sure plenty of other people don't.
That's my brain goes into overdrive every time I hear something like that. Like, how is this done? What is that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you've had Jason McGurr on. And I heard him on another podcast as well. And he actually, on the other podcast, he actually... I'd been meaning to message him on Instagram for a while to ask him about a particular snare sound, because it's one of my favorite ever recorded snare sounds. And he actually talked about that specific song and how they did it. And I was so stoked. And then hearing him on your podcast.
Okay. Which snare sound was that?
It's from a tune called You Are a Tourist on the Death Cab record. It's on Codes and Keys, I think.
Okay. I don't know that record as much. Yeah.
I think that's my favorite. I think it's my favorite album of theirs, actually. It's
really?
Just the sounds are killer, man. Like the sounds are just so killer.
It's a very different sounding record for them.
There's a lot, and also I feel like it was that record that Ben is the singer, right? Yeah,
yep.
Ben. Yeah. His feel maybe changed a little bit. He started singing back a little more, which I think it was that record where I first noticed it, and I'm like, oh, this is not like, it didn't feel like a lot of other vocals on like a rock or indie sort of record. Like it started to sit back and like. Not an R&B neo soul way, but with a bit of a nod to that. And that was one of the first things I realized about that record. And I'm like, I think that might be one of the things that I find so charming about this. And then obviously every other aspect of it's incredible.
Okay, I'm gonna listen tomorrow.
It's so good, man. So good.
One. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so tell me about. This is super geeky, but this is what we're here for. Sure. Your tuning is so meticulous. And the other day I was actually working on like a floor tom drop that like you seem to really have dialed. That's just like you're a tweaker, right?
So the secret for that for me is that it's a 13x8 rack tom.
Okay. Yeah, I just bought these crappy CB drums. That's like a.
I saw that, man. That video you posted where you're holding the snare. It sounded incredible, man.
Right. Oh yeah, we messaged. Yeah, but actually those toms kind of do that. They just I didn't touch them from what they came like. That's how they're tuned at the store.
Right.
But that floor tom, I was like, oh, this could do that. Like I was thinking about you, and started tuning the head up a little higher, bottom head a little lower. It's not. I didn't get there yet, but like I'm inspired by that.
When I'm doing that thing, especially with the 13, actually I prefer it on the slightly smaller drum. I mean these steel. Raw steel ANFs, like they just naturally tune crazy low anyway. Like, they basically tune a full size to 2 sizes lower than they are, like most of the time, and that's where they love to sit. But I'm going like just where I'm not getting too much growl from it being too loose on both heads. So I'll get the batter head as low as I can get it without hearing the wrinkles.
Yep.
And then when it's actually in situ under mics, I'll get the bottom head where it needs to be. So I'll actually just even just tuning one lug here and there on the bottom head just to get rid of too much of the actual growl that's inherent in the tone, and then add saturation back to it, as opposed to having kind of like an ugly out of tune tom growl.
Okay.
And the secret to the saturation on that is Waves J37. Just fucking dimed.
Okay. I'm writing all this shit down, man.
not the input gain, the actual saturation knob though.
Okay.
Input gain you want to keep fairly consistent, because if you run the input too hard, it actually kind of clips everything off it. If you keep the input fairly low and fairly conservative, and then just dime with the saturation,
Wow.
Yeah, there's a really cool sub technique you can use on J37 as well with the delay that's built into it. Set it to like a 1 millisecond delay, and then set the filters to like 20 hertz and 80 hertz.
Okay.
And just turn the delay up until you make an 808 out of it, which is
Damn, dude. You're dropping dimes here. I love it. Cool.
These are all things I intend to charge people for at some point, but
no, it's out there.
I mean, you can't do that with Waves J37.
Yeah, no, it's actually not a Waves. It's secret shit, Australian shit that's not out yet. You can only get it in Perth.
It's Waves, but they're specifically from the Indian Ocean, which is just 15 minutes that way.
You have to fly and then battle 3 sharks.
The toughest part about that whole situation is the 24 hours on a plane that you need to get here, not the sharks.
No shit, I know.
Oh, dude,
when I was there, luckily going home, we stopped in Hawaii to do a gig, so I was like, right.
It's slightly more tolerable if you're flying from the East Coast, or like if you live on the East Coast. But every time I've been to the States, it's fly from Perth to Sydney, or Perth to, actually went Auckland in New Zealand last time. And so that's like between 4 and 7 hours on the first flight, and then the 13
and then
hours
the 14,
from there.
yeah.
Dude, it's brutal. So brutal.
All I know is that somebody was eaten by a shark while I was there, so surfer was eaten by a shark. Yep.
They get hungry, yeah.
I was like, really? While I'm here?
It doesn't happen that often, but it,
I know,
but it does
there,
happen.
Man. The one time in my life I was there.
I'm not scared of being attacked by a shark, but I don't go to the beach. I'm sure there's a correlation between the two.
Now I know what the clip is for Instagram. Now we're just talking about sharks.
If I go to the beach, I'm more scared of a bunch of Greenpeace hippies trying to put me back in the water.
Woo! All right. I don't know where we go from here. That's just great.
I don't know. That's it. I'll see you next time.
That might be it, man. Yeah.
So plugins.
Yeah. So plugins, right? So you're digging the A&F stuff, huh?
Yeah, man. It's they just have a vibe immediately.
They have a thing. I remember watching Matt Chamberlain play at a club here, the Blue Whale, when he was playing those, and I was like, wow. I know Rami a little bit because from living here and then Texas.
Sure, yeah.
And I've hit the drums at the NAMM show, but like hearing him in the club, I was like, wow.
I think they're the kind of drums, like if you were looking to buy like a new set and you were tossing up between like a high-end Sonor and an A&F kit, you're not looking at the same type of instrument. They're two vastly different beasts. You just would never compare them on any real level.
Right.
But I have a Sonar SQ2 kit in the studio, and I've not set a single one of those drums up since I've had these ANF drums. So
wow.
Yeah, they just have more vibe instantly.
Right.
And even things like the snares, like this 14 by 5 steel I've got set up here, compared to, when someone else brings in one of their snares and we sort of set theirs up and go, yeah, it sounds pretty cool. Let's just try, my one that's similar sort of size and whatnot, so we don't have to change setup too much. And it just always sounds bigger and fatter and more hi-fi just straight away. Right. I think it's just a lot to do with like how super thin the shells are and just, I mean, I'm not trying to sell their drums. I just
it's cool.
just been really happy with them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like earlier you said you don't change your mic setup too much. You kind of have a pretty standard thing. Okay.
Yeah. Like I mean, I will from time to time, if I'm like, I won't always have a mono overhead. Like I've got an R84 set up at the moment. I'll sometimes change the position of my room mics. Sometimes I'll put up, like a mono room or a trashier mic. But for the most part, most stuff stays pretty standard. Just because like I'm not doing anything super crazy at the analog front end. Like everything goes through nice analog pre's and whatnot, but I'm not doing any crazy analog processing. So I can really change the tones on the kit and then do things in post. Like I send committed files that I've put a bunch of plugins and stuff on. Yeah. Nothing mental, but I've done work to clean them up.
Right. Okay. That you just answered my question. I was going to say, do you spend a lot of time in post?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not scared of editing. I will edit the living shit out of everything I do if it's necessary. And like most of what I'm doing on a track by track level is cleaning things up. If a snare's a little spiky in the overheads, I'll throw a limiter on it and clip a couple of dB of snare off and things like that. Nothing massively drastic. And I'll send those files committed with the little bit of work I've done. Just make everything a little bit more finished, a little bit more pleasant to listen to. And then I'll also send a stereo bounce of the drums, which I basically those same raw sounds that I'm sending through, but balanced, and then run through a ton of bus processing. Because that's where most of the vibe of any drum mix I do starts at the bus. I would say that's probably 80% of the sound. Okay. And unfortunately, you can't really print bus processing because you just don't get the interaction between the different channels. So yeah,
right. Except on the 2-track, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So.
That's interesting. So if you're going for like a saturated, distorted thing, you're going mainly for the bus. You're not necessarily going for like a distorted snare thing, or
if it's something I'm sending to a client and I don't know exactly where that song's going to go, then I will keep the actual snare track relatively clean. Like I definitely will put a bit of saturation on it. Like I'll quite often J37 or I use the Shep's Omni channel. As like that's my sort of go-to plugin on sort of everything I do, and like I'll dial a bit of saturation in with that, or like I'll mix in a bit of like kind of aggressive FET compressor or whatever. Actually, sorry, the 1176 modeling, the VCA modeling they've got on there. So I'll do a bit of that, and I'll definitely move it in that direction, but I don't want to paint people into a corner. When it comes to mix.
Okay.
But that's why I also send the drum bus print as well. Yeah. Because I'll when I'm doing those sounds, I will run them through a bit of bus processing, so I get an idea of what the whole kit's sounding like as one instrument.
Yeah.
And then, I'll commit the individual tracks, send them through. Some of them will go harder on than others. Yeah, if it is a trash mic or a mono room, then I'll destroy it and be like, this is the entire purpose of this mic. It doesn't sound good for any other reason. But yeah, then the just the stereo bounce of the drums is kind of my references. Like this is my vision of what it should sort of, or what I was hearing, and this is how I feel like it should end up, or where it could end up.
I see. So everything is relatively clean. Except the bus.
Clean, but very heavily in a direction at the actual drum level. Like at the actual raw tone level.
Yes.
Like the kit, the kit's T-tailed up at the moment, you know.
Right.
the ride cymbals got moon gels and O-rings hanging off it, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm
like
curious
it's very
about the
heavy
ring thing, but I don't want to get there. I don't. We're on a too good of a track to get.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's the direction is very heavily gone for at the raw tone level, but I just haven't cooked too much other shit into it.
Sure.
And anyone that was mixing,
you have a vision of where it's probably going.
For sure.
Yeah.
If someone said to me, "Hey, can you go a bit harder on this?"
Yeah.
Then by all means I would, but most of the time I've got no idea who's going to be mixing it.
Yes.
And quite often one of the benefits and one of the drawbacks of kind of pretty much always working in real time is that the song's actually very likely going to change after I put drums on it. So that's like another step of like, okay, I'm going to play it a little bit safe.
Right.
But then again, sometimes the song is going to change because the tone that they've heard me tracking with has like taken the song in a slightly different direction than what they'd initially thought.
Right.
That a lot of that comes back to the Instagram thing, all those stupid dickhead wonky beats that I put up. Like, I get a lot of people contacting me about playing on tunes, and they'll send me my own videos as references.
Right.
And I'll listen to the tune and go, "That's not this tune, though. Like, it's just not like I can't do that. Terrible approximation of Jay Dilla on this song because that song is not that type of song."
Right.
So yeah, that's a good thing to be able to do stuff in real time as well, to sort of explain to them, hey, look, this is what it sounds like if I deliberately play kind of out of time on your beautiful song.
Yeah.
And this is what it sounds like if I do something appropriate.
Yeah, I have like 5 questions lined up. So one, part of it you already answered. Like, I would assume that people want you to do what you're doing on videos.
Yeah.
Is a lot of what you're doing R&B based, hip hop based?
No.
Okay.
Not a lot of it, definitely some, but I think with the hip hop stuff, not many electronic or hip hop or those kind of producers are really looking for multi-tracked raw drums because that's just not what they work with.
Right.
Which is precisely why I'm sort of going to start putting loops and stuff out.
Okay.
Because the way a lot of beat makers are making beats, it's like fast and furious. It's not.
Yes.
It's not sitting there EQing a snare drum until 2 a.m. It's like
they want samples.
Throw these exactly.
Yeah.
One shots at the absolute most.
Yes.
So yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons why I don't get a lot of work from that sort of angle. But the stuff I have done in that vein, I think a lot of people think they want multi-tracked live drums, and
I know
then
what you're saying. Right.
Yeah, you send it to them, and they're just like, "Oh fuck, what do I do with these?" Know?
Right.
So that's a tough one, and that's a conversation I'm happy to have with people. Like, I'm not just going to do a job and send shit and take money if it's not something that I actually think is. Fuck, man, I've been a musician my entire life. I'm used to being poor. I would much rather have somebody wherever they happen to be elsewhere in the world be happy with the interaction we've had than just take some money off them and them end up with drum tracks they can't do shit with.
Yeah. God, it's just I love that we're having a conversation, man, because like, I mean, I really was like, many times I've been like, I mean, you're so good at that thing that you put out so often. And I'm like, what is he doing? Is he doing like a lot of lo-fi beat records or what? Like, what is your work? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like,
look,
I mean, you're
very little.
You're doing what we're all doing. You know what I mean? It's like, it's really not different. I think you have a pretty special skill set at that thing that you kind of showcase through there.
Yeah. Cool.
I think you do that obviously really well. But that's not necessarily music. It's drums.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I try and develop... I mean, there's a reason why all those videos sort of loop perfectly and there's no real stupid chops or anything in them. If there's anything that would be considered kind of, bombastic or out there, they're actually quite subtle things, or it's very much like a very heavily stylized sonic aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea behind all those videos is that they are self-contained
right.
musical ideas.
Sure.
So, you know, I don't see why people couldn't, and well, I know that people have ripped them and put them on records.
Wow.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not going to go any further on that story. But, you know, like...
buy you a coffee? Jesus.
Didn't even respond to my messages.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, someone that could have afforded to respond to my messages too.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, different story.
Hey, man. You know what? I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have a few things to say too, but you know, we'll keep it classy.
Yeah, look, yeah, whatever.
Exactly.
It's in the past. Yeah. Where were we? Yeah. So they are very much self-contained, stylized ideas that could certainly be used in a production of that ilk. You know, and I mean, the crazy thing about it is.
Go ahead. So you'll like take a day and do some of these? Is that kind of how you look at it? Like today, I'm gonna do dial up a sound, play a few beats, they loop well, and this is gonna be my advertising for a week or a month or whatever.
Kinda like it's rare that I'll do more than one in a day.
Okay. Because that shit's time consuming.
It's super time consuming, man. The mix takes 8 to 10 times longer than the tracking does on those kinds. Actually, considerably more than that. Some of those mixes take me 3 or 4 hours because they are taking a sound that I've definitely spent a lot of time on the tones and stuff at the kit, but I've spent very little time on the actual miking and the engineering side of it because a big part of that whole thing for me is challenging myself as to like, what can I make from a less than ideal scenario? And the less than ideal scenario a lot of the time is the fact that a lot of those sounds, until you've done a bunch of work with them, they're fucking terrible on their own because that's the nature of those sounds. You know, to make a hi-hat sound like individual one-shots of a hi-hat chopped up.
Yes.
I mean, the hi-hat mic itself could not be further from that sound to start with, you know? It's like it's a much less than ideal starting point. And that's kind of a lot of the vibe of that for me is like I really enjoy trying to find the way to turn the shit into the lo-fi beat.
That's fascinating, dude. I love that. Right.
There's a lot that goes into that. I mean, I'm very happy to dig into the sort of nitty-gritty of how I turn what is an otherwise very unflattering acoustic drum sound into something that actually kind of works.
I mean, that's really interesting to me. I mean, because it's really all about vibe, right? It's obviously all about a vibe. But at the same time, you understand that what's at the source, even if it quote unquote sounds like shit, where you want it to go and why it sounds like that particular type of shit.
It's so 100%. It sounds like shit because if it sounded like a nice drum sound, you would never get it to that final aesthetic.
Right.
It's just not possible. You can't take a really nice drum sound and turn it into a lo-fi beat that sounds like a collection of one-shots.
Yeah.
It just doesn't really work that way. So the actual sound in the room is just atrocious. But I know that it's the right kind of atrocious, or at least I'm searching for the right kind of underwhelming and atrocious to know that I can get it to that point, you know, with a fucking intense mix.
Right. And you understand the mic setup before you're going into it, more or less?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, a lot of, I would say probably 80 to 90% of what I'm looking for from the mic setup is isolation with that stuff. Because I am going to chop everything super hard. Okay. Yeah.
Hence the SM7 on the ride.
It's a big part of it. Yeah. SM7 on cymbals, man. It's like, it's, I mean, it like I say, it doesn't sound good. Well, but it has the functionality. I like them for certain, SM7s are awesome mics, but they're very particular. Like it sounds good. Actually, I mean, the stuff I've been doing in those last few sessions has certainly not been that sort of stuff. I've come to really like them on hats, especially for having a decent amount of isolation, but not being too bright. And just they're just not sensitive mics, you know, like they need a bit of work to get to any kind of real level. Yes. And they've just got good rejection, not necessarily from a polar pattern standpoint, but just from the fact that it's just not a sensitive capsule.
Right. What's your snare mic?
57 a lot of the time, or an SM7. I used SM7 on snare for a long time.
Okay.
Which I really liked, but I've only got 2 of them at the studio. I've just been using them on cymbals recently.
Okay.
57 I'm totally happy with. It's like I set up with a decent amount of space between my hats and my snare, so like rejection and stuff's okay. And I'm happy to do whatever kind of dynamic EQ and expansion necessary to get a bit more isolation there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also spent a lot of time working on playing cymbals really softly and drums loud. Like that's the big part of that for me. So I'm not as picky with that now. I do really love a 414 or 414. I think Yanks say.
That's what I say. 414.
A 414. I do love them on snare. Rejection's shithouse though. And the R84 as well. AA R84. This guy, which I shouldn't have moved because I haven't taken samples of this kit yet. But sure.
Nope.
R84 on a snare is killer as well. Rejection on that is rad. But whatever rejection you feel like you've gotten at the tracking stage, you then have to add all that top end back into it anyway to have a functional snare sound. So if I do use the R84, I actually quite often use that in conjunction with something a bit brighter. So that I use R84 for body and then whatever else for a bit of sizzle.
Okay. So your partner's always there engineering when you're doing a track?
No, I do all that on my own.
So you're running back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't... actually, if he's around, I'll get him to get levels for me real quick.
Okay.
But I kind of know where I need to set my preamps.
Okay.
Like, I'm never running back and forth being like, I'm 30 dB out with the gain on this preamp. They all roughly sit at the right spot. And I do tend to use the same preamp setup for, each individual channel most of the time anyway.
Yep. So when you're doing a live remote session, you're fairly contained into your tracking room.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how are you running? How are you how are you starting Pro Tools or whatever you're running?
I've got a TV next to me, which I run. I actually run an extra long monitor cable from the computer in the control room and an extra long powered USB cable. So I have a keyboard and a mouse and the TV next to me.
Okay.
But one thing I've been looking into, because it's just such a nightmare moving a mouse around all the time, I'm just going to get a trackpad that I can just mount off my bass drum. Oh. And drive from there. The only problem I have is they're all Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. My computer's in the other room, and there's 2 walls between us because it's all rooms within rooms here. Okay. So I don't know if it's going to work. So I have a friend that works at an electronics store, and I'm going to hit him up, see if I can maybe just borrow one or get him to borrow one as like a staff member or something and try it out, make sure it works. Because the mouse thing's such a pain in the ass, man. Right. The amount of takes I start with a mouse on my floor tom. Yeah, very annoying.
Yes. I think that sounds like me, where often I hit the space bar here and I know I have like 4 bars to get in there, get my headphones on and get ready. And that's usually enough time, but depending on the tempo,
I did used to run back and forth a bit more, but I've been doing obviously setting levels and stuff requires a bit of running back and forth. And before I start the session, I'll record, 16 bars of the tune and go in there and actually do it. Yeah, I'll do a bit of a mix on it as well, so that whatever they're hearing on the other end is as comprehensive of a mix as I can run with no latency. Although audio movers, I always have to run at 128 samples, not 64, which like I only ever run it at the 320, not at the 24-bit or whatever the next one up is, which sounds totally fine. But yeah, I can never run it at 64, and that bothers me because I feel a big difference between 64 and 128 when I'm tracking.
Yeah.
It's not so much you hear a flam or you hear the latency. You're not hearing the sounds as directly as you would at 64.
Yeah, I'm so used to running everything at 120, but I'm also not as particular as I'd like to be about headphone mix.
Right.
Like I will deal if I'm in a real session and I have a headphone box, I get very meticulous. Like I'm building a mix.
Sure.
But when I'm by myself, I'm like, okay, cool. You know, I can hear things. I know what's happening sonically. I just want to play it right.
Yeah, sure.
Like cutting edge.
Our headphone setup here is like I run everything on I always track with JH. Yeah, what are they, 13s? Okay. I only got them like at the start of this year, and I had some other ones before that which shit themselves, and these 13s have been amazing. But I do find when I'm doing the remote sessions and I'm running the hardware buffer at 128, I end up putting unplugged cans over top for like a little bit more isolation, just because there's that well, I guess 64 samples of extra latency that I just feel the tiniest little bit more disconnect, and I don't feel like I have as much of a grasp on what the mics are hearing.
Sure.
Because I feel like just that extra little bit of time, everything feels a little roomier and a little more open than the sounds are actually, than the sounds that are actually being tracked.
Interesting.
Like, I mean, that could be absolute bullshit.
No, I mean, that's what you feel.
That's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really interesting observation. Huh. I've never thought about that.
And 256 is I can't do 256. It's just not possible.
No.
You start to hear two hi-hats.
It's almost like a 30-second note delay.
Yeah, exactly. It's the world's worst slap delay.
But your room is pretty dry in general.
It is dry. Like if you wanted it to sound like a whole reverb, you're pulling up a whole reverb on a plugin. But we've got high ceilings. Like we've got 12-foot ceilings. But I've actually over the years dried the room up even more. Well, actually, I just listened to the episode with Mario Caleri. And you guys were talking about it's easier to make something bigger than to make it smaller.
Yeah.
And I've definitely found that to be the case. The whole other end of the room I actually treated specifically for having a kit there. Like I put a bunch of shit on the ceiling, and then the whole back wall. Some of my older videos, you'll see it. The whole back wall is like black, absorptive material.
Yep.
And then I set up here to do like a live filmed that Bahamas thing I was talking about before, and I just went, oh, it actually sounds better here. So I wasted all that time and energy on the other end of the room, and I prefer the drum sound at this end of the room now. So, yeah. Anyway,
it's funny. The more I talk to people, the more I'm like, that's where I'm gonna put my money next. Is like treating my room a little more, because I like the sounds I get and I'm happy. But the more I tweak, the better I get with things. The more I notice that like things that I want to be able to get, I'm hindered by my room.
Yeah, for sure. I feel the same way a lot of the time here. It's okay. Like I don't find stuff that I'm tracking on, I don't find pulling decent room sounds to be too much of an issue because I've worked so much on the cymbal to drum dynamic.
Right.
But tracking other people, there's not a spot in the room where I can get a better balance if they're smashing away on cymbals. And I mean, that might not be a possibility anyway, if the cymbals are the worst sound on a drum set, it's a real pain in the ass. But I feel okay about the room sounds I'm getting when I'm tracking, but it's not always the case tracking other people just because it's just the dynamics of how they're playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so do you said you record vocalists a lot, but you record guitar players, bass players, things like that?
Yeah, everyone, yeah. I tend to handball the guitar to my business partner because I fucking hate recording guitar. It's my least favorite instrument to record.
Why? Why is that?
Tuning, man. Just does my head in. Like, I hate guitars. I love guitars. I play guitar. It's always been one of my favorite instruments. But as soon as I started recording them, I'm just like, oh, I hate this so much.
That's funny to me because one of my main inspirations is like guitar players and tones, right? Like
for sure.
I love jealousy
that
factor of like guitar tones like sent me down this path more or less. For like, fuck, I want to be able to like manipulate my stuff like that, So it's funny to me that you find it like a pain in the ass.
I love the tone pulling part of it, especially if you're going for a real character thing, like a super, gnarly fuzz thing or whatever for a lead part. I love that side of it. Mm-hmm. But then the like, doing takes and like, okay, we'll go back and do another take and we'll focus on the tuning of these chords for that take, that sort of stuff that does my head in. I think actually the main, if it's not super heavily distorted guitar, I can cope with it a lot more. But I find like we've done a bunch of like kind of like skate punk records and that sort of stuff here, which is really enjoyable. But having like high gain guitar at like 230 BPM for like an entire day, just sends me absolutely batty. Like just does my head in, man. Like just hearing that amount of harmonics just blaring at my face for an entire day, I can't do it, man.
Fair enough. I hear you. Right on.
Yeah.
What about bass?
Bass I love because I like writing bass lines.
Yeah.
Well, I like recording good bass players. You know, it's not always the case.
I mean, the bass tone thing, I just love, like, when you know, I'm fortunate to play with a lot of bass players that really understand the variety of bass tones, and mainly it's through the bass choices, you know.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that really can make or break something for me. Like, I did something recently, and it wasn't bass wise. It was less than ideal, fulfilling tonally than I'm kind of used to. And I always feel like, because obviously between bass and drums, those really can drive the whole vibe of a song. Where you're setting down that rhythm section thing, and somebody's playing like a hollow body K or something like that with a felt pick. I mean, that influences your drum tones, and it influences the whole, you know, the vibe, the production, the part. It influences so much, as opposed to somebody that's just going to show up with a 5-string.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to do the whole time. It's like, okay,
yeah,
you know.
The character bass over the utility bass is like, that's the ideal scenario for sure. I mean, very much so. Like you said, like the tone, the bass tone and the drum tone should, I think, especially if they're going down early, they should kind of dictate where the rest of the song goes from from a sonic aesthetic. I don't like to overcomplicate bass recording though. Like if we can get away with just putting it through the Avalon U5 and then using even like cab simulation plugins or whatever, I'm very happy to do it that way, as opposed to miking up a fridge.
Sure.
Man, especially with the way cab sims sound now.
Man, I agree. The UAB15 for me, it's like amazing.
We've got a few different ones, and they kind of all have their merits. Man, I actually really want to spend some time with the new Neural DSP stuff, which I haven't got any of yet. Because that stuff, like all the demos I've heard, sounds phenomenal. But like, I feel like if I'm putting mics on a bass cab, I'm probably going to fuck it up more than the people that made the cab sims. You know, like I would rather run a really nice, you know, the Avalon, the U5 DI sounds incredible. I would rather run that into something software and sort of let them do a bit of the hard work when it comes to the engineering of a cab sound.
Yeah. Again, I feel like it's really like it's the instrument itself. You know,
for sure.
Kind of like a snare. I mean, you're going to get a certain character out of a snare.
Yeah.
You're not going to get certain things out of it, you know, what it is. Yeah.
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 I feel like we've talked about a lot of not drums. And
I think that's okay. It's funny. I thought of a band, and I think they're from Perth. Shy Panther.
Sex Panther?
Shy
Panther. There was a band called Sex Panther. I don't know.
Okay.
Shy.
Maybe they weren't. I discovered them on my last tour of Australia, but I thought it was a Perth thing, but maybe it was a Melbourne thing.
There are Shy. Yeah, okay. No, fuck, I don't know. Like I say, I'm horribly sort of disengaged from the local scene at the moment.
Okay.
So.
Well, if we're boring people not talking enough drums, fuck them. That's what I say.
Fuck it. Yeah. Got plenty of other episodes to listen to.
I find this review with Brody Simpson. He's talking about fucking bass tones, man.
Look, there's just more emphasis on the recording than the drums in this episode. Exactly. It's fine.
Well, I mean, this is like my whole thing. Like, I feel like your sonic palette is being influenced by more than drums, because you understand how to record bass tones, guitar tones, vocalist. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like that, like mixing overall is the thing that helps, you know, those macro things help you understand what you should be doing at a drum level.
Yeah. And that's something I reference a lot when I'm doing the sessions as well. Like I will, when I'm not necessarily like fighting for an idea, but when I'm sort of selling an idea that I have for a section, sort of being like, I feel like it could really go in this direction, I'm referencing all the other aspects of the mix when I'm sort of talking to them about that. Like, if I was to do this thing, that pad sound you've got in the background there, it's like you would kind of make that a little bit more sort of swirly and move around in the field a little bit more, and those BVs could do this. And, if I stop the drums here, you could cut the other instrumentation here and let that vocal lead into that last chorus on its own, and like that sort of stuff. Like, I'm very much trying to think on a more holistic producery level. Because, I mean, that's what I enjoy. I guess it's probably totally selfish of me to do it that way. I just enjoy doing things that way more.
Well, are you producing much?
Yeah, like everything we work on, I would say we're definitely producing.
You're a producer.
Not just engineering, yeah. Like, we're pretty much producing everything from scratch.
And are you mixing? Like, besides drums, are you mixing?
I don't do much of the mixing. My business partner, Mark, tends to do most of that.
Okay. Does Mark
I'm okay at mixing.
Sounds?
No, he doesn't touch the fucking drum sounds. I'm okay with mixing. I'm bad with the prep and the logistics of it. Like, I'll pull up a session, and before I actually started putting it together in a decent mix template, I'm already like tweaking shit, and then I pull the mix template in and I just go, "Oh, you dickhead, you've got to start again anyway." So I'm terrible at that shit.
Okay.
But like,
if somebody set it up for you though, are you a good mixer?
I think if
it's hard.
It is, and I think if it's the right kind of song, if I can be working with more sort of character sounds, I feel good about that. If I'm trying to do like a really polished, like contemporary rock mix or something, probably not, because I feel like I just don't actually have the attention span for that. Like, there's so much nitty gritty stuff, like so many finding ugly resonances and ugly cymbal frequencies and all that sort of stuff that you've got to do to make like a larger than life kind of polished sound. I just get kind of a little bombarded, a little overwhelmed with that sort of shit. Man, if I could be mixing stuff with like minimal track counts and everything's like really kind of like character driven sounds, then I think I can do that okay.
It's funny because lately, for various reasons, I'm having this idea, and I don't know if I'm actually going to commit to it, but actually pulling my mics away, like almost, I don't want to say every day, but every track I do, because I just feel like my creativity is coming from minimalistic. Like, I did something today. I just had a ride cymbal and a hi-hat. I literally pulled a few mics away, and I think it sounds cooler than anything I've done in a bit. I feel like I almost need to force myself into the minimalist thing, because I know that I thrive when it's minimalist, but I need to almost force myself, because I'm getting bored with, like, okay, I got my stereo overheads, I got my mono overhead, I got my tom mics, I got the blah, 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 and I carve certain things out, and I'm like, oh, it's the same shit,
Man, that's definitely the case. That's one of the reasons why I don't tend to... If I've got a kit set up for sessions like I've had recently, where it's like more of a full regular kind of kit setup, you'll rarely see me do a video on that setup, because I sit down at it and for the most part I just play the same shit. Yeah. Like, I'm not inspired to do anything more creative, because it is just kind of bog standard within the context of a session or a song.
Yep.
Where there's direction for me to take and elements for me to play off, then by all means I can find something a little more creative to do in it. But to play drums on my own and do a video on a bog standard setup, I just don't feel that anymore. It's not doesn't feel like a standalone musical idea for me.
Right.
Yeah. But I do tend to, I guess if you were to look at my Instagram feed, you'll see like batches of 2 or 3 videos of the same setup.
Yeah.
And even like it might not, the drums and stuff might change, but it might not change. But like the idea behind and the intentionality behind the setup will change sort of every few videos, whenever I sort of have to clear the room and do something else and then set shit back up again.
Yep,
I like that. I like that idea that I can start from scratch quite often. I mean, I hate the idea of starting from scratch. It means I gotta fucking set everything up again. But like the idea of just approaching things a little differently, you know, in batches of a week or so feels right to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what I did today, and it was a total pain in the ass. It took me probably double the time than it should, but
Yeah.
by not having a crash cymbal, I ended up utilizing hi hat like kind of like a Ringo thing, like open hat, like not
Yep.
like riding the floor tom and using the open hat, like that probably wouldn't have come if I had crash cymbals up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
Man, have you noticed that as you sort of record more, and I mean, you've been doing it for a while, as you work with more different producers and engineers and record more drums, you use far less crash cymbals. You hit, like, I hit just so many less crash cymbals these days than I ever have before, because they're just that thing that jumps out to people's ears and kind of pisses them off a little bit. I just find I work with so many producers who are like, can you just do way less on the cymbals at all times?
I think
totally
it's a modern,
subscribe to that.
Yeah, I think it's a modern production thing for sure. I definitely ask when there's certain tunes, I definitely ask up front, like, should we overdub the crash cymbals?
Yeah. I do a bunch of that.
Yeah, because it makes sense for a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's where we're at. I mean, you can listen to a whole record and not even hear a crash cymbal.
Yeah.
Let alone a drum fill, but
yeah. I'm okay with that too. I feel like I've got two drum fills that I've ever been okay at playing, and I'm sick of them. So happy to not play any.
Dude, come on.
I just like to hear, like, we've got names for them at the studio. There's the duck butter, which is 1, 2, 3 duck butter. Like, there's just a handful of fills that we have names for here that they're the only ones I ever play. And it's like, I guess we could probably just duck butter in the middle of that verse. So we'll do that, like, it's just one of those things where I feel like it's like, the more time you spend on drum fills, the less time, the more time you spend on figuring out what drum fill to play, the less time you spend on actual important shit. Well, but I think that's probably just me not being lazy and not exploring better drum fills,
I mean, look, my whole thing on drum fills is like, are they serving the music? Are they taking the energy in the right direction?
Yeah, for sure.
It's not, I mean, if you can get a cool fill in there that takes it in the right direction, but awesome. That means, that's great. But for me, it's more of a functional, hey, where are we heading?
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's something I've really noticed recording lots of other drummers, is trying to convince them to play more standard fills, like even just play just a snare roll, like, play ander 4E ander on a snare, as opposed to rack tom, ride bell, floor tom, kick, snare, ghost note, like
right.
Like, it's just trying to get them to do something that's like dead straight down the middle, but is all about forward momentum, not about melody, not about syncopation or phrasing. It's just like, it is literally, we're only looking for momentum from this fill.
Yes.
And people are quite reluctant to do that, because I feel like if they hit more different shit, it's more creative.
Interesting, because enda 4E enda on the snare is a very powerful fill.
Super powerful, man.
If that's happening.
If that's what gets you out of the end of chorus 2 into the start of the bridge, like, the start of that bridge is fucking moving.
Yeah.
And it should be a little bit fast. That one should come a little bit early. Like, that's the feel of that fill.
Amen.
Yeah.
There we go. Right?
And then I start looking at waveforms and start moving them back.
Right. Damn it. Then you don't sleep at night, and then
man. Yeah. Every now and then you go into like autopilot mode when you're editing shit, because you're just kind of tidying a few things up. And I'm terrible for this. And I feel like I can kind of edit stuff without listening to it a little bit. If I'm just kind of trying to rip through something and make sure it's all kind of in place. Mm-hmm. And the amount of times I've edited like a snare roll fill, and then you listen through the song, you just go, I'm just going to drag that region the whole way back to the start of that fill and not worry about it anymore. It's like, you played it right in the first place, you dickhead. It doesn't matter what it looks like.
That is something to get over. Doesn't matter what it looks like.
Man, it's the reason I've kind of stopped using Melodyne so much for vocal tuning, because it's too visual. I start looking at it and I just go, well, that one looks a little bit flat and that one looks a little bit sharp. It became way too visual for me, so I had to ditch it and just find other ways of doing it.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, tell me about that fucking ring on the ride cymbal. Let's get down to brass tacks here.
Well, my Venmo is... Man, I literally made this the other day. I've just been making O-rings recently. This is just an ambassador cut into a roughly 1 inch O-ring, to the point where I couldn't even be bothered finding something to actually make it a consistent width.
Cool.
I did it accidentally one day.
Okay.
Where I was just like, I had an O-ring on a drum and I was doing some other shit and I'm like, just hung it on the ride cymbal to get it out of the way, and I hit it and I went, that is the actual perfect amount of damping that I wanted, that I've always wanted on a ride cymbal. And I think because it makes a tiny bit of contact at the bell, like I've got it hanging on the, just under the felt, makes a tiny bit of contact on the bell, and then it makes just a small amount of gradual contact as it comes down the bow of the cymbal and then hangs off the edge.
Yep.
And it's actually more subtle, but feels more musical and feels like it retains most of the frequency spectrum of the cymbal than even just like a square of moon gel does, or a rectangle of moon gel does on the bell of the cymbal.
Right.
Man, it's just the perfect amount of damping and I'm at the point now I've got some thicker O-rings which I just hang off the edge of my hats, just kind of hang them off the back of the hats as well, just to tame like the tiniest little bit of annoyance.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, man, I love it. I've got like sort of 1 inch O-rings, one that's probably 1.5, 2 inches as well. Okay. And it's just like a tiny bit of difference. And also if you have like a really dark trashy crash cymbal and you just want it to be a bit shorter, so good for that. Just hanging off the front edge. So you're changing
the O-ring with the cymbal size or the particular cymbal?
Not so specifically, but like I have a few different sizes around me at all times now, and if one of them sounds too much and the other one's not quite enough, I'll just go with the one that's not quite enough. I'm not going to go measure and shit.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's such a good sound. It's the perfect amount of ride cymbal damping, and then I always have a couple of different types of sticks for any section that I'm playing on ride cymbal. Right. Man, these things, these Meinl Big Apple Swing.
Did Meinl make sticks?
Yeah, Meinl makes sticks. Dude, they make great sticks. Really? I've actually just signed on with them. They're like, oh wow. So basically, like a few years ago, before they released their sticks, I was at my local drum shop, which happens to be like 30 seconds down the road, talking to my mate Darren there, who's like a wealth of knowledge on drum stuff. And I'm like, man, I've been using these particular sticks from ProMark and these ones, and I just want the model in between them. I want this kind of taper. I want a tip like the Erskine sticks, but a little bit fatter, so the drums aren't quite so thin. Yeah. And then like a week later, my artist guy at Meinl in Germany emailed me and he's like, hey, do you have sticks? And I'm like, I don't really have any kind of deal or anything. And he's like, okay, cool, that's good to know. And then that was it. And then like a month later, they started making sticks. And I looked at the catalog, and this was the stick I'd just been describing. Wow. Like it was like almost, I would say 99% accurate to the idea that I had in my head for a drumstick. Yeah, and so that was just like very serendipitous. So I ended up playing those sticks. Yeah, man, these things sound phenomenal. And so I always have it's like a longer hybrid 5B with a smaller, like a sort of barrel-y tip. Yep. And then this one with the kind of like the Erskine ride stick, but a little bit fatter at the tip. It's funny. I have not thought about that stick in a while, but I was playing that stick for a long time, but it just wasn't lasting. I was playing it live, and it just wasn't. Yeah, sure. For me. But man, there's nothing like that bead on that stick. Yeah, for sure. It's just, my main problem was the tip was a little bit too small to sort of set drums off if I was going for a fatter drum sound. Yeah. And I didn't love the rebound of it quite so much, whereas I think these are a bit of a longer taper. I prefer weight back heavy sticks because I hold the stick right in the back of my hand. I don't want any weight in the front of it. Yep. Yeah, those things sound incredible. And so I always have one of them and then one of the sticks that I kind of use for all-purpose playing, always ready for ride cymbals on any session, just because you get two cymbals for the price of one, which is a nice thing to have. Right, yeah. Right. Amazing. All right, man, I think we've sufficiently bored people to death. What do you think? Yeah, sure. I don't know. My tolerance for boring people to death is probably pretty high by this point. So let's get feedback from the audience. If you're bored, then I don't know. Send me a hateful message on Instagram. Exactly. Somebody. Yeah. Yes. Just tell Brody. Don't tell me. Doing this shit.
Man, thank you for your time.
Oh, dude, thank you. It's really stoked to be on here.
We got to like catch up a little, and I got to pick your brain a little about what you're doing out there because, I mean, just sonically, just things are phenomenal, and your playing is phenomenal, man. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Dude, and likewise, I've watched pretty much all your YouTube content. Have done for a long time.
Thank you.
Wow. Probably should have given you some money on Patreon.
God.
Go and give Blair money on Patreon.
Yeah,
cheapskates. But yeah, man. Likewise, I've watched all your stuff. I think I first saw you. Actually, no. I'd watched a bunch of your stuff, and then I was watching like one of Warren Hewitt's videos, and I'm hold on, fucking same guy. What's going on here? Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, big fan of what you do, man. Sounds a killer.
I appreciate that, man. Right on. Well, we'll definitely talk more frequently now that we've sufficiently, homied out. All right, dude. Thank you.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I learned a lot, as I knew I would.
Thank you. Yeah, dude, and likewise, listening to the other eps and watching your stuff, man. I've learned a ton. It's been great.
Thanks, man. All right, dude. Well, we'll wrap again soon.
Cool.
You're free to go about making actual music now and not nerding out.
I think I might just have a coffee and a cigarette and go home. I reckon.
All right, man. Stay away from the sharks.
Cool, man. Let's chat more soon.
Yeah, we will.
Wicked.
All right, Brody. Take care, man.
Yeah, dude.
Thanks.